nobile orchids and other type of dendrobiums which require a winter rest, and I will tell to you how I actually care for these orchids. Here I have a few notes because I do want to touch base on quite a few points, so I don't want to miss them out. So let's see, first of all we will talk about dendrobium cycles of growth, or actually their cycle of life, let's say. So first we have the growing cycle, which usually starts when you see the nodes at the base or the new shoots, like in here. And it usually ends when the cane is fully mature, and you can see that from the tip it doesn't grow any more new leaves. And then we have the resting season, when we need to provide the so-called winter rest or the dormancy period, where the orchid needs to receive cooler temperatures, bright light. You need to stop altogether fertilization, and you need to water very little. Now I will start to talk about some very important factors that you need to meet to keep these orchids happy. So first of all, you need to give these orchids the brightest light that you can without burning their leaves. You will see that once you will have an orchid which is very established into growing into very high light, it will start to produce narrower leaves, because these have less surface, and they will be able to support better very high light, because the bigger or the wider the leaf it is, the more chances it has to overheat and actually burn. So for example, this orchid is in my care for quite a lot of years, and about 3 or 4 years, and I always kept her in very bright light, and now she is producing a bit more of a narrower leaf and more long, while those which are newly purchased, we can see that the leaf is a lot more wide, and yeah, the orchid knows better what she is doing. But for example, this orchid, when was put in the same light than this one, it got burned. And here I have a leaf which was from here, from the top, and we can see that here I have a burn, but this one doesn't have any burns. So yeah. These orchids grow very well if you keep them outdoors in their growing cycle, because they do benefit a lot from very high light and the air ventilation. But if not, you can choose any type of windowsill, but do try to give them as much light as you can. For example, if you are growing them indoors, try to keep them exactly on the windowsill, not further away. The temperature is very important with these orchids. So in their growing cycles, they can withstand very high temperatures, even up to 35 Celsius, as long as you make sure you hydrate them properly. In the dormancy period, in their winter rest, you need to drop the temperature as low as down to 3 to 5 Celsius in order to induce blooming. That would be the temperature in the nighttime, of course. You still need to keep them away from freezing temperatures, because you would kill them. Okay, let's talk about watering and fertilizing these orchids. This is super important in order to grow this very tall. I don't think this is even in focus, but it does go a bit more upwards. So you need to water and fertilize these orchids heavily in their growing period. And I use MSU formula as a fertilizer, and because they are potted in semi-hydro, I fertilize them at about 200 ppm at each watering. And the watering method is that I fill up the entire pot, and then through the drainage holes they drain out, and it remains about maximum 10 centimeters of a reservoir which does supply the orchid for the next few days with water and fertilizer. This is very, very important because these orchids have about 6 months to fully grow into these big beasts, and it is, as I said, a very crucial factor that you fertilize them correctly. If you grow them in normal traditional medium, an organic medium, let's say maybe bark, maybe sphagnum or a mixture, you should let them slightly dry out in between waterings, and that sometimes in the summertime may mean that you need to water once every 2 to 3 days. You need to stop fertilizing altogether somewhere in August or September, but you will need to take a close look at your orchid and to see that from the top of the cane she doesn't grow any more leaves. I will try actually to bring you an orchid closer so you can better understand what I mean by this. So here I have a very good example. This cane is a mature cane, this one I mean. Is a bit shriveled because she has been recently repotted and lost a few roots, but we can see that from the aches, from the base of the cane, she doesn't grow any more new leaves, but these ones are new shoots which we can see that didn't stop yet growing. This is very, very important, so you can understand the moment when you need to stop fertilization. So you need to stop fertilizing altogether in the resting period, but you need to water just enough to prevent the canes, the mature canes, from shriveling. That in the winter time may mean that you will water them somewhere once a month, but again, if you grow them in organic medium, you will just pour a bit of water and it will drain out through the drainage holes. Because these orchids are do not have drainage holes, they have a reservoir, you need to pay extra attention to how much water you put in there. So you have two options here. Either you will water normally, you will fill up the pot, you will let it drain, and then you will tilt the pot so you get all the water out from the reservoir. Other, you will put just a tiny bit amount of water, let the orchid completely absorb it through the roots, plump up the canes, and then see if she needs more water or not to fully hydrate those canes. You need to make sure you prevent the orchid from shriveling up, but you need to make sure you don't water it too much, because that can prevent flowering next season. So in my case, to be quite honest, I prefer to fill up the entire pot and then empty out the reservoir, so the whole roots are moist, but that is only if I make sure that the orchid doesn't receive temperatures under 15 Celsius, because at lower temperatures than 13 or 15 Celsius you can cause root rot if the root zone is moist. If you know that in the nighttime you will have lower temperatures than this, I would only go and put let's say 3-4 spoons of water and make sure that that water is absorbed from morning time until noon, so it doesn't stay overnight with a moist root zone. But of course you should take into account the size of your orchid, the size of the root mass, and that is a decision you need to make on your own. About humidity, these orchids are not fussy at all. They can withstand a range from 20 to 80 or even 90% if you have an air ventilator around. In my case, they never had any troubles other than when they were not properly rooted, and then I did get some accordion type leaves. But that can happen with any orchid, and that is more related to the moisture from the root zone, or because the orchid doesn't have roots, it cannot pick up that moisture, and not with the moisture from the air or the humidity. As I said, to rebloom these orchids, you absolutely need to give them a winter rest. I know Roger says that his orchids or his dendrobiums don't require that winter rest, but he is actually providing the winter rest because that is the season which does give the orchids less light. It is cooler, and of course because of that he needs to water less frequent, and also he is stopping fertilization in that period, so it is the same thing actually. So you need to provide cooler temperatures as down to 3 to 5 Celsius at night until some little bumps appear on the cane, and I will show to you here. I have a case. I'm not sure, I believe they are buds because they are kind of fat. Let's see, I have one in here and in here I have another one, and one in here. We will see if they are canes or cakeys or blooms. They can sometimes push up blooms in the middle of the growing season as well, but usually that is caused when in the winter rest it did receive some fertilizer, and that can confuse the orchid whether it is time to grow or to bloom. In the case of this orchid, it is of course confused because it is a newly purchased orchid, and it is a bit off-season, so in the first 2 years these orchids can behave a bit strangely because they still get adjusted to our environment. So you will need to provide this temperature until you see these bumps. After that you can slowly start to water a bit more often the orchid, and when the bumps are a bit more pronounced you can start to slowly fertilize them. Before you see these bumps you will not provide any fertilizer, and you will give them very little water, just enough to prevent the canes from shriveling. When in bloom, these orchids have the most amazing fragrance ever. They have a very floral, sweet scent, but the scent can differ a bit from plant to plant or from variety to variety. For example, this is the spring dream pollen. This one has a very floral, a bit citrusy and sweet fragrance. This is an orchid species. This is a Dendrobium speciosum. This orchid requires a very harsh winter rest. This one should stay until 2 Celsius outside, and this is known to be one of the most fragrant orchids. I have yet not seen it in bloom, so I cannot pronounce myself on the fragrance. While this one, this is the Red Emperor. It was a newly purchased, and to be quite honest, it was not fragrant for me, but it might be because it did change environment. And this one is the Dendrobium Oriental Smile Fantasy. This is supposed to be again very fragrant, but is the first time I actually have it, so I didn't yet give him the winter rest. We will see next spring how he smells. I do remember I did had the Dendrobium nobile Akatsuki, and that one differed a bit from this one. I think it had a sweeter scent, a bit more artificial than the Dendrobium Spring Dreamer pollen. I'm not sure why everybody runs away from this white hybrid. I think it is very common, but it's gorgeous, and if you grow these orchids correctly, you sometimes can have 50 or 100 blooms per cane, because they can reach even 1 meter in height. Yeah, that can be quite something. About repotting, it is very important to repot these orchids only when you have a new growth which is pushing new roots from the base. I will again show to you a case in here. If you try to repot it immediately after the blooms finished, or even worse, in their resting period, you can even kill them. You can see here I have a pretty big new growth, about 20 centimeters in height, and it is producing here from the base new roots. This is a good time to repot it. Yeah. because when you repot these orchids, especially if you repot them from organic medium into semi-hydro, you have a very high chance of killing those roots out. Again, if you repot it from bark, even into the same medium, you will disturb quite a bit the roots. The only thing that I think won't actually disturb them is if you have a fully established orchid into a pot and you just need to upsize or uppot the size, and that would mean basically that you will take away the orchid from the pot, and because the orchid is so root bound, it will stay all the medium in there, so you will just take it from there, put it into a bigger pot, put more medium around. That can be done even into the middle of the season, towards the end of the growing season. I would not do such a thing in their resting period. It is just my opinion, you can do whatever you please. So I think now I have talked pretty much everything about them. For aesthetic reasons, once the bloom completely finish and fade, they will have these little stumps that will remain where the blooms were. Once those dry as well, and they sometimes can take even a year, I would cut them with a sterilized scissor and maybe spray some hydrogen peroxide to make sure they don't get an infection. It is very, very important when you repot them. You put the base of the orchid on top of the medium, because these orchids are very, very sensitive to that orange bacterial infection, and I had lost the Aurora Oriental Smile because of that. When I have purchased it, it was potted a bit too deep in coco coir. It is very similar to the peat and very similar to the soil actually, and it was buried way too deep in that thing. The base of the new growth started to rot, and until I have seen it, the whole base was rotted, so I could not do anything. So they are very sensitive from that. And I also had an infection occurring in the past as a beginner on one of my dendrobiums. When I have cut away these stumps, they were still green. This is why I said you only need to cut them when they are dry. So I cut that thing. I did not apply hydrogen peroxide nor cinnamon on the wound, and again it got that orange infection. But at that point I did not have 20, I did not have fungicide, so I'm not sure if in these conditions I would be able to stop the infection. I think I covered all, so if you have any questions that I didn't think about, please leave them in the comment section below, and I will be more than happy to answer them. My cat is trying to enter in the closet. Come on, sweetie. Look at her. She is so sweet. And she likes to play, and she likes to enter in every single closet that she can find. But I love her, of course. Oopsie. So okay guys, this has been the video for today. If you have liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you very much for watching, and see you all next time. Bye!